Dixie here. Today I'd like to introduce two new pieces of gear, and those are the Laurel Designs Pro Rain Poncho and the Superlight Solo Bivy. I never really thought that I'd have any interest in taking a tarp as my shelter on a backpacking trip because I really enjoy the false sense of security that comes along with using a tent. Just kind of as I go along and get more experience, I like to grow and have different perspective. And as I've mentioned different backpacking shelters to people, I always feel like I can't truly offer any advice, at least from my own experiences, because I've never tried sleeping under a tarp as my shelter on a backpacking trip. So I decided that I wanted to test out a tarp while on my thru hike of the Pinhoti, and I still aim to do so for probably a 100-mile section or so once it makes sense to go back out there. So I looked into this poncho tarp and I thought, how cool is that? It acts as my rain gear during the day, it's a shelter by night, and I thought that it would be a really versatile piece of gear and something that is completely different than anything I've ever done before. So I am approaching this whole tarp thing as a complete newbie. This is kind of a follow me as I document my learning experience, and I'm sure I'm gonna do a lot of things wrong.
Oh, looks like a saggy diaper.
But before I get into the experience of my first night in this tarp, I want to talk about the specs of the tarp and the bivy. If you order a Pro Rain poncho, you'll see on Laurel Designs website that you have two different options for the material type, and that is either 20 denier sil nylon or DCF. Now, I was interested in the DCF, but it was an extra $155 just to save a few ounces. And there are other benefits of DCF, but for me personally, it wasn't worth the extra $155, but to some people it might be. The weight of the sil nylon version of the poncho tarp is 11 ounces, and the dimensions as it's set up as a tarp are pretty reasonable. I was afraid that it was gonna be real tiny, but it's 9 feet long, and the front width is 66 inches, and the back width is 60 inches. As far as color goes, in the sil nylon version, you can choose between gray, green, and a bright orange. And then the DCF version, you can choose between green and camo. There are other options available, and you have to make decisions when you're ordering one of these. For example, they offer a carbon fiber pole set that's an additional $50 and weighs 2.6 ounces, but I think that it would be wonderful for beginners like me, and I almost wish that I had purchased this so it would have made easing into tarp life a little bit easier. Also, you can get titanium stakes along with your order of the Pro Rain poncho. 8 of them for $25. They're titanium and weigh 2.2 ounces, but I already had a lot of stakes at home, so I just opted out on this option. They also offer 8 Superfly mini beaners for an additional $20. They weigh 0.1 ounce a piece. I found that hard to believe until I held one in my hand, but those are mainly, from what I understand, convenient for being able to wear the poncho tarp as a poncho and not have a bunch of guy lines hanging off of you. So then when you go to set up camp, having these little mini beaners with some guy line attached to it, then you can just snap on to the little loops once you pull your poncho off, if you've been wearing it in the rain during the day, and it just makes transitioning that a little bit easier. I did opt in for these, so it's gonna make my overall shelter and rain gear, I guess, weigh 0.8 ounces more for 8 of these mini beaners. You also get 40 feet of non-reflective guy line with your order in either yellow or green. I decided to just go with what they offer for free, but you can upgrade for $6 to the reflective guy line, and they'll give you 50 feet instead of the standard 40 feet. The Pro Rain poncho alone is $189, but because I opted for those mini beaners, that tacked on an additional $20, so the total cost of this was $209 for me. And then for the weight of it, I have the 11 ounces that the tarp weighs itself, plus the 0.8 ounces for those 8 mini beaners. And then if I was to use all 40 feet of guy line, which I won't, then that would be an additional 2.9 ounces for a total weight of 14.7 ounces plus stakes, which with any shelter that I'm going to use, I'll need stakes. The only downside that I've seen to the Pro Rain poncho so far, just out of the box and testing it out one time, is that it doesn't come already seam sealed, but they do send you a little tube so that you can apply it and seam seal it yourself. But I'm definitely going to have to test this out in the rain before I get out on trail, so I don't find out the hard way that my seam sealing technique did not go well the first time. I added the Superlight Solo Bivy to my setup also because I want to be protected from bugs when it's buggy outside if there is cooler weather when I finally get to go out and use this. Then having the Bivy adds several degrees of warmth to the setup. Also, if it's raining, having the Bivy helps with backsplash so that you don't find yourself soaking wet with hypothermia in your sleeping bag. And from what I can tell, it just adds another layer of safety and probably some false sense of security if you choose to use it. Now let's go over the specs for the Bivy. The sizing is from a medium to an extra large, and I almost went with the medium because it says that it works well for people who are up to 6 feet and 2 inches in height. I'm 5'8", but it also mentions that you should have a standard length and width sleeping pad, and they use the dimensions 72 inches long, 20 inches wide as like a regular sleeping pad, but they mention that it should only be 1.5 inches thick at most. And the NeoAir Extra Light that I use is 2 inches thick, so it might have worked because I use a short pad and I'm only 5'8", but then they mention if you think you're mildly claustrophobic or you find yourself tossing and turning and moving a lot when you sleep, then you might want to size up. So when I saw that, I knew that I needed to size up. The large will fit somebody that's up to 6 feet, 6 inches tall, that has a long sleeping pad and a sleeping pad thickness of 2.5 inches or less. And you can check out the additional sizing for the extra large, but they do say that it's very rare that folks order those, and they are custom and non-returnable. Because I upgraded to the large sizing, that tacked on an additional $25, I assume because they have to use more material to make it a larger product. But I didn't mind bumping up that little bit extra to make sure that I fit comfortably and I didn't feel like I was claustrophobic in a cocoon. And as far as weight difference goes, bumping up to the next size only added 1/2 ounce. If you order this Bivy, you'll find that like with the Pro Rain poncho, you'll have several different options. One of them is what type of floor you want on your Bivy. So you can have a sil nylon floor or you can have a DCF floor. I went with the sil nylon floor because to get the DCF floor, you'd have to pay $70 additional for weight savings of only 1.5 ounces. You can choose a top color of either black, green, or orange. You get to select which side you want your zipper on, and they mention that it's standard for folks to think, well, if I'm right-handed, I want my zipper on the right side. But if you think about trying to undo a zipper with your right hand on your right side, you can see how that might be more difficult than reaching across yourself and unzipping. So I was really glad that they included that information in there because I probably wouldn't have thought that far into it. So I opted for the zipper on the left side. Next, you get to choose what type of netting you want. They have either a full hood netting, so just the whole area there on the top of the Bivy is netted, or you can get just the half moon shape window on the Bivy. For myself, because I was afraid I'd be feeling a little claustrophobic, I wanted as much netting as possible. But they do have Bivys in existence that are fully netted. I just wanted something for more of a 3-season weather type thing. This particular Bivy was attractive to me because I could have the ventilation of the full hood area but still have the added warmth of the remaining part of the Bivy, so hopefully it'll work with me well in 3 seasons. And finally, you can opt in on the zipper lube and cleaner for an additional $10. This is something that you can buy later. I think it's $12 if you don't opt in. I chose not to opt in, but they do recommend that if you have their products that have zippers, that you get this to just kind of keep up the maintenance and keep your zippers working well. Now, total weight for the Bivy is 7.5 ounces. So if you add that to the weight of the tarp, which is 14.7 ounces, then you get a total weight of 22.2 ounces. The Bivy total cost me $225 because I had that $25 upgrade to go to the large size. So total cost for the shelter setup is the $225 for the Bivy plus the $209 from the Pro Rain Poncho Tarp, and added together that totals out at $434. I know some people might look at this and think, why would you pay $434 for a 22.2 ounce shelter? You could just get a tent that costs less than that and is, you know, reasonably in the same weight category. But you have to keep in mind that this also factors in the cost and weight of rain gear. I almost forgot to talk about my initial thoughts of how the Pro Rain Poncho acts as a poncho. Honestly, it seems like it'll probably do just fine. One of my biggest concerns is on the sleeves. When I use a regular rain jacket, they tend to have, well, I prefer when they have an elastic wrist so that it kind of hugs my wrist and keeps rain from, you know, pouring down into my coat. So not sure that that's going to work like that with this. And then also there are snaps on the bottom here and on each side, and then snaps on about midway right here. But as you can see, it's still slotted pretty largely right there. So in the area where this elastic band goes around, and there might be a better way to do this, I just have it kind of the little slider deal here cinched some, and you know, just to where it fits my waist. So I think having this little bungee belt will help with the rain coming in, keeping this close to me. But I don't know, it does make me wonder with these big openings how it'll work. I guess it's not the end of the world if the clothes that I hike can get damp, because I typically carry another outfit to sleep in that I know is going to be warm and dry when I get to camp. There won't be any issue with not having breathability, I don't think, because of these large openings and the fact that it's a poncho. I used a poncho on the Camino de Santiago, and I did like having the poncho, especially putting it over my pack. With this poncho, and because it has this bungee cord to kind of help with the wide openings, it might be interesting trying to wear the pack under the poncho like I did on the Camino with the poncho that I had there, just because having to undo the bungee and then take off the poncho and then take off the pack and get into it just seems like an extra step that might be a pain. But maybe it won't be. I won't know till I try it. If I wear the pack over this, that would definitely work. It's a little long in the back, but I think even wearing the pack on top of it, it's going to bunch up some and hopefully won't be dragging the ground or anything like that, because I don't want the wear and tear from it dragging the ground. So I'll let y'all know how it works out as a piece of rain gear. Now let me tell y'all how the first night in this new shelter went for me. First of all, I started with the setup way too late in the afternoon and ended up not getting it set up until about dark. It took an embarrassingly long amount of time probably, and there were a couple reasons for that. One, the directions on Mountain Laurel Design's website honestly just didn't really make sense to me. I tried to follow them step by step and it just did not compute. Also, I looked on YouTube to see if there was some sort of video that was like an instructional setup type thing, and I couldn't find anything like that. And finally, it was the blonde leading the blonde, because my sister Montana was helping me set it up. So anyway, I finally did get it up just from looking at the pictures there on Mountain Laurel Design's website and kind of seeing how you would want to set it up if it was inclement weather. And I just kind of went with that because I figured that was a good baseline to start with. And I think the main reason that there aren't necessarily videos out there that's like a step-by-step, this is how you do it. First of all, this is not the most popular shelter for the backpacking community, and then also they're so versatile, so I assume it really depends on personal preference how you want it set up. It depends on the weather, it depends on the terrain of where you're set up. Just I think a lot of things play into it, so there's not a one size fits all as far as setup goes. So anyway, I looked at the pictures there on their website, made do, and ended up figuring it out. It's behind me right now and has been set up since last night. Hasn't fallen, still holding its top pitch, so I'd say that we ended up doing a pretty good job. Crawling into the tarp with the way that I've got it set up was a little bit awkward. Kind of felt like a dog getting in a dog kennel, got to climb in the front and then turn around. I'm sure I'd get better at that, and also depending on how you have it set up, probably helps with ease of entering and exiting. As I mentioned, I was afraid that I was gonna feel a little cramped inside the bivy, but after I zipped it up and everything, I really didn't feel that way at all. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the netting was not laying on my face, because on the underside of the tarp, there's a little hook there, and you can hook a bungee cord that's attached to the bivy up to that hook, so it helps keep that raised and off of your face. The bivy comes with 4 little loops on each corner, so you can stake it down if you prefer. I started off with all 4 corners staked and ended up taking the stakes out near my feet. I did like having the stakes up on the upper end just because it helped kind of stretch the bivy and make it more taut, and I think that helped with having more space and not feeling so closed in. Also inside the bivy there was room for a bottle of water, for my cell phone, so anything that I would want to reach without having to unzip the bivy and reach out inside, under the tarp, that wouldn't be an issue with this. I think you could keep it right in there with you and next to you, so if you wake up in the middle of the night and want a sip of water, you've got it right there next to you. I was a bit afraid that I was gonna burn up inside the bivy and under the tarp, especially with it being warmer temperatures right now, but I didn't get hot until this morning when the sun started beating down through the tarp, and then things got a little steamy. I didn't notice any sort of condensation. That was something else that I was concerned about with the bivy, and especially with it cocooning me all around except for the netted hood area, but I didn't notice anything like that. When I test it out in the rain, I'll let y'all know as far as condensation goes, because that's one of my biggest concerns with having the bivy. Even under the tarp, things felt a bit more roomy than I expected, and I think if I had had things raised up, it would have felt even more like that. I think having my pack down there beside me, if I had a normal length sleeping pad, would have been fine. Having trail runners under there, I certainly would have had room for that. But I do sleep, and did sleep last night, with my pack under my legs because I have the short NeoAir Extra Light sleeping pad. I didn't put the pack inside the bivy with me to put my legs on it. I put the bivy on top of the pack, and it seemed to work fine, but it does make me question whether having that abrasion of the bivy against the pack will eventually wear a hole in it or tear it up. So that's the only thing I'm concerned with there. If any of y'all have experience with that, let me know your take on it. From what I can tell, transitioning from the poncho to the tarp is pretty simple, which is great, especially if it's raining and you're wanting to get your shelter set up as quickly as possible. So there are just some snaps that you undo, and then the hood rolls down and a strap goes across that to make sure that you don't have water pouring into your shelter at night. Overall, after just spending one night in the Poncho Tarp bivy setup, I can say that I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's not that I thought that I would be completely miserable, but I was a little nervous about making the switch from a tent to a tarp, but I'm actually more excited about it now. I am glad that I got the practice in setting it up, and I think that if I had had to set this up the first time on trail, it would have been a nightmare. I am a little concerned about how it'll do setting up in super heavy rainy weather, also extremely windy weather. I think that I'll have to be pretty strategic about how I set up and where I set up. So with that said, I don't think that this would be the perfect type of shelter for somebody who is just getting into backpacking, because you're already nervous about so many things when you're first starting out, that I think having a shelter that is going to go up and is going to perform well in different weather types is a comforting thing and is a good idea. I would say this is also not so good for just camping or a shorter backpacking trip where you're wanting to spend more time at camp and enjoy camp. Not that this isn't enjoyable sleeping, but this I feel like is more cut out for somebody who's going to spend more time with the hike during the day, making the miles and using their shelter just for sleeping at night. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today on the Pro Rain Poncho and the Superlight Solo Bivy. I am really looking forward to testing this out on trail and letting y'all know how it works out. As I mentioned, this is absolutely a learning experience for me, so I'm probably gonna mess up some things. But if any of y'all are more experienced than I am, so you have at least 2 nights using a tarp, then please feel free to share your tips and tricks to make life a little bit easier, or any resources that you might have. Feel free to leave that in the comments below. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.